My daughter-in-law thought she had cornered an old widow with a pen and a stack of papers, but she forgot one thing: I had signed tougher documents than hers before she was even born. Claire Whitmore walked into Harold Pierce's law office that Tuesday morning wearing a cream wool coat, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile people use when they believe the room already belongs to them. My son Andrew followed 2 steps behind her, shoulders tight, eyes lowered, looking less like a husband and more like a man who had been told exactly where to stand. I was already seated by the window, my black handbag resting on my lap, my hands folded over it as if I were just another nervous old woman waiting to be guided through decisions she no longer understood. At 68, people had begun speaking to me in slower voices, as though age had taken my mind instead of just softening my hands. Claire had learned to use that. She called me Mom in public, Margaret when she was annoyed, and Sweetie when she wanted something signed. That morning, she chose Mom. "We're so glad you decided to do what's best for everyone," she said, sitting across from me without waiting to be invited. "This will make things easier for the whole family." I looked at her face, at the careful concern she had painted over impatience, and I almost admired the performance. Almost. On the polished conference table between us sat the folder she had brought, thick with documents she claimed would protect my future. A family management agreement. A property authorization. A medical planning form. Words that sounded gentle until you read the lines beneath them. 3 days earlier, I had believed Claire was only pushy, only ambitious, only the kind of daughter-in-law who looked at my Vermont house and saw square footage instead of 36 years of marriage. 3 days earlier, I still wanted to believe Andrew would never sit quietly while his wife tried to move me out of my own life. But grief teaches you the difference between loneliness and blindness. I had been lonely since my husband Thomas passed, but I was no longer blind. Harold Pierce entered the room with his silver glasses low on his nose and a second folder tucked under his arm. Claire barely glanced at him. She was watching me, waiting for the moment my hand would tremble toward her pen. "Shall we begin?" she asked brightly. Harold placed his folder on the table. Not hers. Mine. The smile on Claire's face paused, just for a second. A small thing, but I saw it. I had raised a son, buried a husband, balanced a household on one income when interest rates were cruel and winters ran long. I knew what fear looked like when it first entered a room. Harold opened the folder and slid the first page toward her. "Before Mrs. Whitmore reviews anything you brought," he said evenly, "you should be aware that her assets were moved into a protected trust at 9 o'clock this morning." Claire blinked. Andrew lifted his head. The room went still. Harold continued, calm as church bells. "No property can be sold. No accounts can be accessed. No prior authorization remains valid without Mrs. Whitmore's direct consent and my office's review." Claire's fingers froze on the edge of her folder. For the first time since I had known her, she had nothing ready to say. I did not smile widely. I did not gloat. I simply looked at my daughter-in-law and let the silence do what my anger never could. I had let her believe I was old, lonely, and easy to corner. That was her first mistake. 72 hours before Claire froze in that law office, she was standing in my kitchen in Vermont, arranging lemon slices in a pitcher of iced tea as if she had lived in my house her whole life. It was Sunday evening, the kind of early fall evening Thomas used to love, when the maple trees behind the garage turned the color of copper pennies and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke from the neighbors down the road. I had set the dining table for 3 because Claire had insisted on bringing dinner over. She said I cooked too much for myself. She said I needed to rest more. She said a woman my age should not be climbing basement stairs to pull out serving dishes. Every sentence sounded like care until you listened closely enough to hear the handle hidden inside it. Andrew arrived late, still in his work shirt, his tie loosened, his face tired in a way I had begun to recognize. He kissed my cheek, but his eyes moved quickly to Claire, as if checking whether he had done it correctly. That small glance hurt more than I expected. My son had once run through this kitchen in muddy sneakers, stealing warm biscuits before dinner and laughing when I scolded him. Now he stood in the same room like a guest who needed permission to love his own mother. Claire placed a casserole on the counter and smiled at me. "Mom, you really should let us handle more of this house for you," she said. "It is a lot of responsibility for one person." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and looked around the kitchen. Thomas and I had painted pale yellow in 1994. The cabinet still had the brass handles he installed himself. The window over the sink still looked out toward the bird feeder he filled every morning, even in January when the snow reached halfway up his boots. "I manage," I said. Claire laughed softly, not cruelly enough for anyone else to notice. "Of course you do. But managing is not the same as planning." During dinner, she was sweeter than usual. She asked if my knees bothered me in the cold. She asked whether the property tax bill had gone up again. She asked if I still kept Thomas's life insurance papers in the upstairs file cabinet. Each question arrived wrapped in concern, but they all walked to the same door. Money. The house. The accounts. The will. Andrew pushed green beans around his plate and said very little. When I mentioned calling Harold Pierce to review some documents before the end of the year, Claire's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Only for a heartbeat. Then she smiled. "Harold is old-fashioned," she said. "Families should not have to run everything through attorneys." I looked at her across the candlelight and noticed how still her eyes had become. In that moment, the room felt colder, though the thermostat on the wall read 71 degrees. When Andrew stood to carry the plates to the sink, Claire waited until his footsteps disappeared into the kitchen before she leaned slightly across the dining table. Her perfume was soft and expensive, something floral that did not belong in my old dining room with its faded rug and the scratch on the floor where Thomas once dragged in the Christmas tree stand. She kept her smile in place, but her voice changed. It dropped lower, smoother, almost private. "At your age, holding on to everything only makes things harder for the people who will have to clean it up." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Not because the words were unclear, but because they were too clear. They sat between us like a cold dish nobody wanted to touch. I looked at the candle flickering near her hand, then at the gold band on her finger, the one Andrew had bought after borrowing $5,000 from us because he wanted her ring to be perfect. Thomas had written the check without hesitation. "A man should start his marriage with pride," he had said. I wondered what he would have thought of the woman sitting across from me now, speaking about my life as if it were clutter in an attic. I folded my napkin slowly. "Clean it up," I repeated. Claire gave a small laugh and looked toward the kitchen doorway, making sure Andrew was still out of earshot. "You know what I mean. This house, the accounts, the old paperwork, all these decisions. It is too much for Andrew to carry later. If you love him, you should make things simple before it becomes a burden." There it was. Burden. She did not call me one directly. Claire was too careful for that. She set the word down beside me and let it breathe. I had heard similar language before, always dressed up as concern. Too much house. Too many stairs. Too many bills. Too many memories. She never said, "You are in the way." She said, "We worry about you." She never said, "I want control." She said, "We need a plan." Andrew returned with coffee before I could answer, and Claire brightened instantly, turning her face toward him with that warm little smile she used like a porch light. "Your mother and I were just talking about making things easier for everyone," she said. Andrew looked from her to me. "That sounds good, Mom," he said, too quickly. I saw then that this conversation had not begun at my table. It had been rehearsed somewhere else, maybe in their car, maybe in their kitchen in Burlington, maybe during one of the phone calls Andrew had started taking outside. I lifted my cup and felt the heat through the porcelain. My hands did not shake, and I was grateful for that. Claire watched me over the rim of her coffee mug, waiting for me to soften, to apologize for owning too much, living too long, remembering too clearly. Instead, I smiled as if I had not understood a thing. It was the first lie I told her, and perhaps the cleanest. After Claire and Andrew left that night, the house settled into the kind of silence that used to comfort me. The dishwasher hummed in the kitchen. The old wall clock clicked in the hallway. Somewhere outside, leaves scraped softly across the back porch, pushed by a wind coming down from the hills. I stood at the dining room table longer than necessary, gathering cups that were already empty, wiping crumbs that were not really there. It is strange how the body keeps doing ordinary things when the mind has already stepped into danger. I replayed Claire's words again and again. At your age. Holding on to everything. Clean it up. She had not spoken like a daughter-in-law worried about an aging mother. She had spoken like someone measuring curtains in a house she did not own yet. I carried the folded napkins to the laundry room, then stopped in the doorway of Thomas's study. His desk was still exactly where he had left it, facing the window, with his brass lamp on the left and his old paperweight from Boston on the right. After he passed, Andrew offered to clean out the room for me, but I had said no. Claire had looked disappointed then, though she covered it quickly. Now I understood why. The file cabinet stood against the far wall, locked, quiet, full of the life Thomas and I had built one careful decision at a time. Deeds. Insurance papers. Tax returns. Bank statements. The trust draft Harold Pierce had urged us to update 2 years earlier, before Thomas got sick and everything else became more urgent. I touched the top drawer but did not open it. Not yet. The next morning, I was making oatmeal when the phone rang at 8:13. The caller identification showed Green Valley Credit Union. My first thought was that I had missed a payment, though I never missed payments. Old habits from hard years still live in the bones. I answered, and Joanne Miller's voice came through, lower than usual. Joanne had known me since Andrew was in elementary school. She had seen me deposit paychecks, cash savings bonds, and sign loan papers when Thomas and I bought this house. She did not waste time with small talk. Margaret, I need to ask you something carefully. Did you authorize anyone to request access information on your primary checking account and the home equity line connected to your property? My hand tightened around the spoon. The oatmeal bubbled over the edge of the pot, but I did not move. No, I said. Who asked? Joanne went quiet for a second too long. In that pause, I heard the answer before she gave it. The request came through an online inquiry form late Friday afternoon, she said. It listed Claire Whitmore as the family contact and included enough personal information that my assistant flagged it instead of dismissing it. I turned off the stove. The kitchen seemed suddenly sharper, every sound too clear, every surface too bright. What kind of information? I asked. Joanne sighed softly. Your date of birth, your address, part of your account number, and a question about whether a power of attorney could be added remotely if you were unable to come in person. I looked toward the hallway, toward Thomas's study, toward the locked drawer Claire had been asking about with sugar in her voice. Joanne, I said, keeping my voice even, please do not release anything to anyone but me. Her answer came firm and immediate. I already placed a security hold on your profile. But Margaret, you need to speak with your attorney. I thanked her, hung up, and stood in my kitchen while the oatmeal cooled into a gray lump in the pot. There are moments when fear arrives loudly, and moments when it simply sits down beside you. Mine was quiet. It pulled out a chair and waited. Then I walked to Thomas's study, unlocked the file cabinet, and began reading every document Claire had hoped I would never read alone. Inside Thomas's study, the air still carried the faint scent of cedar, printer paper, and the aftershave he used every morning for 36 years. I opened the bottom drawer of the file cabinet first because that was where we kept the oldest records, the ones Claire would have considered useless because they were not digital and could not be searched from a phone. The deed to the house was there, exactly where Thomas had labeled it in his careful block handwriting. So were the insurance policies, the bank letters, the property tax statements, and the unfinished estate folder Harold Pierce had mailed us before Thomas's second hospital stay. I sat in Thomas's leather chair and spread everything across the desk. For nearly an hour, nothing looked wrong. That almost made me feel foolish. Maybe Claire had only been nosy. Maybe Joanne's call had frightened me into seeing shadows in a normal family misunderstanding. Then the printer beside the bookshelf made a soft clicking sound. It had done that for years when waking from sleep mode. A tiny mechanical cough Thomas always joked sounded like an old man clearing his throat. I glanced at it, and that was when I saw the corner of a page sitting in the output tray. I had not printed anything in weeks. I stood slowly and pulled the paper free. It was not one page. It was 7. The first page was a draft letter addressed to Green Valley Credit Union, requesting that Andrew Whitmore be added as an authorized family representative for all account discussions. My name was typed at the bottom, with a blank space above it where my signature would go. The second page mentioned my house on Ridge Hollow Road and described it as a property suitable for liquidation within 90 days of transition to senior living. Liquidation. Not sale. Not downsizing. Liquidation, as if my home were a storage unit full of old furniture. I kept reading. The third page listed estimated values. The house. My savings. Thomas's life insurance remainder. My individual retirement account. Even the small certificate of deposit we had opened the year Andrew graduated from high school. Claire had missed nothing. On the fourth page, there was a proposed budget for a private senior community 40 miles away, written in neat bullet points with notes about reducing emotional resistance by emphasizing safety and companionship. I read that line twice. Emotional resistance. That was what she called my grief. That was what she called my right to stay in the home where I had washed birthday dishes, folded Andrew's baby blankets, and held Thomas's hand during his last winter. I did not cry. Crying would have softened the edges of what I was seeing, and I needed every edge sharp. The fifth page was worse. It mentioned Harold Pierce by name. Do not let Margaret meet with Harold alone. Use Andrew to explain family pressure. Present documents as temporary. Temporary. That word was the ribbon around the trap. I looked toward the hallway, half expecting Claire to appear with that bright smile and another casserole dish. But the house was empty. Only the printer hummed beside me, guilty and ordinary. I gathered the pages carefully, tapped them into a neat stack, and placed them in one of Thomas's old manila folders. Then I wrote the date across the tab. Monday, October 9th. Evidence. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. For the first time, I understood the full shape of Claire's plan. She was not trying to help Andrew prepare for the future. She was trying to remove me from mine. I sat at Thomas's desk with Claire's printed plan in front of me and understood that the next move could not be anger. Anger would warn her. Anger would give her time to change passwords, deny everything, or tell Andrew I was confused. So I did what women of my generation learned to do long before anyone called it strategy. I made tea. I washed the cup. I folded the dish towel over the oven handle. Then I picked up the phone and called my daughter-in-law with the softest voice I could manage. Claire answered on the second ring, cheerful and breathless, as if she had been waiting for me. "Mom, is everything all right?" she asked. I looked at the folder labeled evidence and let my eyes rest on Thomas's handwriting across the old deed. "I have been thinking about what you said last night," I told her. "Maybe you are right. Maybe I should let the younger generation help before things become too complicated." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to hear victory rearranging itself in her mouth. "I am so relieved to hear you say that," she said gently. "Andrew has been so worried, and honestly, I have been worried too." Of course she had. Worried I would read. Worried I would call Harold. Worried I would remember that being old was not the same as being helpless. I do not want to be a burden, I said, giving her the word she had left on my dining table the night before. She took it immediately. You could never be a burden, Mom. We just want to protect you. Protect. That was another word people used when they wanted the keys to someone else's door. Claire said she would arrange a meeting with an attorney she and Andrew knew in Burlington. I said that sounded fine. Then I added, as if it had only just occurred to me, perhaps Harold should look things over too. Thomas trusted him. Her voice tightened. Harold may make this more complicated than it needs to be. These are family papers, not a court battle. I closed my eyes for 1 second. There it was again. Do not let Margaret meet with Harold alone. You are probably right, I said. I just get nervous with legal language. By the time we hung up, Claire had scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning at Harold's office only because I insisted I felt more comfortable somewhere familiar. She thought she had managed me. That was useful. At 10:30, I drove 12 miles into town with the evidence folder tucked inside my black handbag. Harold Pierce's office sat above the pharmacy on Main Street, where the stairs creaked and the receptionist still kept peppermints in a glass bowl. Harold had known Thomas for 40 years. When he saw my face, he did not ask me whether I wanted coffee. He closed his office door. I laid every page on his desk. The bank request. The draft authorization. The senior living budget. The note with his name on it. Harold read in silence, his jaw tightening only once. When he finished, he removed his glasses and said, "Margaret, we need to move today." So we did. Before the courthouse closed, Harold filed the new trust documents. Before the bank ended business hours, Joanne placed additional safeguards on every account. Before sunset, my old authorizations were revoked, my will was updated, and my house was protected from sale without my direct written approval. I drove home under a pale orange sky, passing the elementary school where Andrew once made a paper turkey with my name written on the feathers. I did not feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt awake. That evening, Claire texted me 3 heart emojis and wrote that she was proud of me for being brave. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you, dear. I will see you Tuesday." Tuesday morning arrived with a thin frost silvering the grass along Ridge Hollow Road. I woke before sunrise, though I had barely slept. The house was still dark, and for a few minutes I sat on the edge of my bed listening to the old furnace click on beneath the floorboards. Thomas's side of the bed remained untouched, the quilt smooth where I had stopped reaching across in the night months ago. I dressed carefully, not for Claire, but for myself. A navy dress, low black heels, my pearl earrings, and the wool coat Thomas had bought me for our 30th anniversary. If my daughter-in-law expected a frightened widow in a cardigan, she would have to be disappointed quietly. Before leaving, I walked through each room and touched nothing. The dining table. The banister Andrew slid down when he was 9. The framed photograph from Cape Cod where Thomas had one arm around me and the other around our son. Claire had reduced all of it to numbers on a page, but I needed to remind myself that a home is not just an asset. It is a witness. Harold met me at his office 30 minutes before Claire and Andrew were due to arrive. Joanne had sent over the bank report, printed and signed. Harold had copies of the new trust, the revoked authorizations, the updated will, and a formal notice stating that any future financial inquiries had to go through his office. He placed everything in a clean folder and looked at me over his glasses. "Are you sure you want them in the room when we discuss this?" he asked. I thought about Andrew at my table, silent while his wife spoke of my life like a burden to be managed. I thought about the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and call them golden flowers. "Yes," I said. He needs to hear what silence has helped create. At 10 o'clock exactly, Claire walked in as if arriving at a closing on a house she had already purchased. Andrew came behind her, pale and distracted, carrying a paper coffee cup he did not drink from. Claire hugged me lightly, careful not to wrinkle her coat. "Mom, you look lovely," she said. "This is going to be such a relief once it is done." I nodded. "I believe it will be." We sat around Harold's conference table. Claire placed her folder in the center with both hands, smoothing the cover like a hostess laying out napkins. "These are very simple," she said. "Just temporary paperwork so Andrew can help if anything comes up. Nothing dramatic." Harold reached for the folder, but Claire kept one hand on it. "Maybe Margaret should sign first, and then we can all review copies," she said, still smiling. Harold did not smile back. "That is not how I advise my clients to handle legal documents." Claire's eyes flicked toward Andrew. He cleared his throat. "Mom, Claire only means that we do not want this to turn into a whole complicated thing." I looked at my son for a long second. His hair had begun to gray at the temples, just like Thomas's once did. "Andrew," I said softly, "when did protecting your mother become complicated?" He looked down at his coffee cup. Claire stepped in quickly, her voice gentle but firmer now. "This is exactly why we need structure. Emotions make these conversations difficult." She opened her folder and slid the first page toward me. "This allows Andrew to speak with the bank for you. Just in case." I picked up the document. I read the first line, then the second, though I already knew what it was. The wording was not temporary. It was broad. Too broad. My hand moved toward the pen Claire had placed beside the page. I saw her shoulders loosen. I saw Andrew exhale. I let the moment stretch until the room trusted it. Then I set the pen down. Not loudly. Just enough for the sound to land. I opened my handbag, removed Harold's folder, and placed it on top of Claire's papers. "Before I sign anything," I said, "there are some documents of mine you should both review." Claire's smile stayed in place, but the color beneath it shifted. Harold opened the folder and began with the bank report. "On Friday afternoon, an unauthorized inquiry was made using Mrs. Whitmore's personal information," he said. "The request attempted to explore account access and power of attorney options." Andrew's head lifted. "What?" Claire gave a small laugh. "That sounds like a misunderstanding." Harold slid the printed pages across the table. "Then perhaps you can help us understand why your name appeared as the family contact." The room became very quiet. Claire looked at the report, then at me, and for the first time that morning, she did not look like someone managing a difficult old woman. She looked like someone who had just realized the door she planned to lock from the outside had been bolted from within. Claire stared at the bank report as if the words might rearrange themselves into something innocent. They did not. Her name sat there in plain print, attached to a request no caring daughter-in-law should have made without permission. Andrew reached for the paper, but Claire placed 2 fingers on the corner before he could pull it closer. "This is being taken out of context," she said. Her voice was still controlled, but the sweetness had drained out of it. "I was only trying to understand what would be needed in case Margaret had an emergency." Harold folded his hands on the table. "Then you should have asked Margaret." Claire turned to me then, not with apology, but with disappointment, as if I had embarrassed her by noticing. "Mom, you know how these things are. You forget details. You get overwhelmed." Andrew and I were trying to prevent confusion. Andrew looked at me quickly, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not belief. Not yet. But uncertainty. Harold opened the next document from my folder and slid it into the center of the table. It was the draft letter I had found in Thomas's printer, the one requesting that Andrew be added as an authorized representative for all account discussions. Under it came the property valuation page, then the senior living budget, then the note that said not to let me meet with Harold alone. Claire's face changed with each page. A small tightening around the mouth. A blink held too long. A breath taken too carefully. She had prepared for denial. She had not prepared for paper. "Where did you get those?" she asked. "Not, those are not mine." "Not, I have never seen them." "Just where did you get those?" Harold did not answer. "I did. From my printer." Andrew turned toward Claire so slowly that it hurt to watch. "You printed these at Mom's house?" Claire's hand moved to her necklace. "I may have worked on a few planning notes while we were there last month. That does not mean anything. Families plan. Responsible families plan." I looked at the page with the words emotional resistance printed in neat black type. "Is that what you called it when I wanted to stay in my own home?" Claire's eyes flashed, but she softened her face before Andrew could see too much. "Margaret, nobody is trying to take your home. We were discussing options." Harold pulled out the final packet. The new trust. The revoked authorizations. The updated will. The formal notice to all financial institutions. He placed them neatly in front of Claire, one after another, not rushed, not dramatic. "As of 9 o'clock yesterday morning, Margaret's house is protected under a trust that cannot be altered by family pressure. Her accounts require direct verification through my office. No third party may request information, initiate transfers, or discuss property matters on her behalf without her written consent in person. The prior drafts you brought today have no force here." Claire's lips parted, but no words came. Andrew whispered, "Yesterday morning." I nodded. "Before I texted Claire that I would see her Tuesday. That was when it happened." The stillness. Claire looked down at her own folder, then at Harold's documents, then at me. The confidence she had carried into the room seemed to leave her body all at once, like air slipping out of a torn balloon. Her shoulders lowered. Her fingers stopped moving. Her face went pale beneath the careful makeup. She had not lost money in that moment. She had lost the story she had been telling everyone, the story where she was the responsible young woman saving a confused widow from herself. Andrew pushed back from the table. The chair legs scraped softly across the carpet. "Claire," he said, his voice thin, "tell me this is not what it looks like." She turned to him, and for the first time, her smile did not arrive when called. "I did this for us," she said. The words were quiet, but they filled the room. "For us. Not for me. Not for the family. Not for my safety. For them." I looked at my son then, and I watched the sentence reach him. It crossed his face slowly, breaking one small illusion at a time. He looked older than he had when he walked in. I did not comfort him. Some truths must be allowed to land without a mother rushing to soften the fall. Claire's words stayed in the room long after she said them. "I did this for us." Andrew stared at his wife as if he were seeing a stranger wearing a familiar coat. Harold remained quiet, giving the truth room to finish its work. Claire tried to recover, the way she always did, by smoothing her voice and reaching for control. "Andrew, you know what I meant. Your mother is alone in that house. The taxes keep rising. The maintenance is ridiculous. We have talked about this." Andrew looked at the papers spread across the table. The bank report. The property valuation. The senior living budget. The note warning her not to let me speak to Harold alone. "You told me she wanted help," he said. His voice was not loud, but it had changed. "You told me Mom was confused and embarrassed to admit it." Claire's eyes moved quickly to me, then back to him. "She is proud. You know how proud she is." I almost smiled at that. Pride was the crime people accused older women of when we refused to disappear politely. Harold slid the unsigned papers back into Claire's folder and closed it with one flat hand. "These documents will not be used," he said. "Mrs. Whitmore has made her wishes legally clear." Claire stood so quickly her chair rocked behind her, but even then she did not shout. She knew better in an attorney's office. "This family is making A terrible mistake, she said. I looked up at her, this woman who had hugged me at holidays, complimented my pies, and counted my rooms in her head while I served her coffee. No, Claire, I said. The mistake was thinking my silence meant permission. Her face tightened. For a second, I saw the real anger beneath the manners. Then she grabbed her folder and walked out, leaving the door to close softly behind her. Andrew did not follow right away. He sat there with both hands around a cold paper cup, staring at nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded younger than 42. Mom, why did you not tell me sooner? I looked at my son and felt the old instinct rise in me, the one that wanted to protect him from shame, from guilt, from the consequences of choosing comfort over courage. But I was tired of protecting grown people from the truth they helped create. Because I needed to know whether you were my son, I said, or just her witness. His eyes filled, but I did not reach across the table. Not this time. Love does not mean handing someone a knife and pretending the cut was an accident. Harold gave me the final copies to sign, and I signed each page slowly, writing Margaret Elaine Whitmore in the same steady hand I had used on mortgage papers, school permission slips, hospital forms, and birthday cards. When it was done, the house was still mine. My savings were still mine. My future was still mine. Outside, the October air was cool and clean. Andrew walked beside me to the sidewalk, asking if he could come by later to talk. I told him he could, but only if he came alone and only if he came as my son. Then I got into my car and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. I did not feel victorious. Victory is too loud a word for what I felt. I felt returned. Returned to my own name, my own judgment, my own front door. When I drove back to Ridge Hollow Road, the maple trees were glowing in the afternoon light, and my house stood exactly where Thomas and I had left it, patient and strong. That evening, I made myself tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, the simple kind Andrew loved as a boy. I ate at the kitchen table with the lamp on and the curtains open. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt empty. It felt guarded. It felt earned.